The flames consumed the canvas cover of the wagon with terrifying speed, turning the white snowstorm orange and gold as Sophia Mallory screamed for help into the howling wind. She had been traveling alone through the mountain pass between Boise, Idaho, and the mining camps to the north when her lantern had tipped during a violent gust, spilling oil across her supplies and igniting everything she owned in this world. The year was 1882, and winter had come early to the Idaho Territory, catching travelers unprepared for the savage blizzards that swept down from the mountains. Sophia had wrapped herself in every blanket she possessed, but now those very blankets were catching fire as she struggled to escape the burning wagon. Her skirts tangled in the wooden seat where she had been huddled against the cold. Vincent Moretti saw the orange glow through the white curtain of snow and kicked his horse into a gallop despite the treacherous footing. He had been riding from his ranch toward Boise to pick up supplies before the pass became completely impassable, but now he forgot everything except that light and what it might mean. As he drew closer, he could see the wagon fully engulfed, could hear the terrified screams of a woman trapped inside. He did not hesitate. Vincent threw himself from his horse while it was still moving, his boots hitting the snow-covered ground hard as he ran toward the flames. The heat hit him like a physical blow even through the freezing air. He could see her now, a young woman with dark hair, her face streaked with soot and terror as she fought against the fabric and wood that held her prisoner. Her sleeve was on fire, the flames crawling up her arm as she beat at them with her other hand. Vincent did not think about the danger. He had been raised on a ranch, had fought wildfires and stampedes, and his body moved with practiced efficiency even as his heart hammered in his chest. He grabbed her around the waist and pulled with all his strength. The wood splintered and gave way, sending them both tumbling backward into the snow. But the fire had not released her. Her dress was burning, flames eating through the thick wool of her traveling clothes. Vincent rolled her in the snow, using his own body to smother the flames, his hands beating out the fire that clung to her sleeves and skirt. The smell of burnt fabric and singed hair filled his nostrils as he worked, his only thought to extinguish every spark before it could burn her skin. When the last flame was out, he pulled her away from the wagon, dragging her through the snow to where his horse waited. The wagon gave a great crack and collapsed in on itself, sending sparks flying up into the snowstorm like furious fireflies. Sophia was coughing, gasping for air, her hands clutching at Vincent's coat as he lifted her into his arms. "I have you," he said, his voice rough from smoke and exertion. "You are safe now." She looked up at him with eyes the color of amber, wide with shock and pain. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Vincent could see burns on her hands where she had tried to fight the fire, could see the raw red skin on her wrists where the flames had touched her before he had smothered them. He stripped off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her, then mounted his horse with her cradled against his chest. "We need to get you warm," he said, though he knew she was in shock and might not understand. "My ranch is closer than town. Can you hold on?" She nodded weakly, her face pressed against his shirt. Vincent turned his horse and urged it into a careful trot, mindful of the woman in his arms and the treacherous conditions. The snow was falling so heavily now that he could barely see 10 feet ahead, but he knew these mountains like he knew his own heartbeat. He had been riding these trails since he was a boy, first with his father who had come from Italy to make his fortune in the American West, and then alone after his father had died 5 years ago. The ride to the ranch took nearly an hour, every minute of it torture as Vincent felt Sophia shivering against him despite the coat and his body heat. He talked to her the whole way, keeping his voice low and steady telling her about the ranch, about his horses, about anything that might keep her conscious and fighting. "What is your name?" he asked as they crested a ridge and began the descent toward the valley where his ranch lay. "Sophia," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Sophia Mallory." "Sophia," he repeated, liking the way it felt on his tongue. "I am Vincent Moretti. You are going to be fine, Sophia, I promise you that." She did not respond, but her grip on his coat tightened slightly, and he took that as a good sign. The ranch house emerged from the snow like a blessed vision, its solid log walls and stone chimney promising warmth and safety. Vincent had built additions onto his father's original cabin over the years, turning it into a proper house with separate rooms and real glass windows. He had done well with his cattle and horses, had made something of the land his father had claimed. Now he was grateful for every improvement as he carried Sophia inside and laid her gently on the sofa near the fireplace. The fire had burned down to embers, but Vincent quickly built it back up, adding log after log until the flames roared and heat began to fill the room. Then he turned his attention to Sophia. Her eyes were closed now, her breathing shallow. The burns on her hands and wrists looked angry and painful, and he knew he needed to treat them quickly. He heated water on the stove and gathered clean cloths, his hands steady despite the fear that gnawed at him. He had seen men die from burns, had watched infections set in and claim victims that the fire itself had spared. But he had also learned some doctoring over the years, had treated his ranch hands and his animals, and he would use every bit of that knowledge now. "Sophia," he said softly, kneeling beside the sofa, "I need to clean these burns and bandage them. It is going to hurt, but I will be as gentle as I can." Her eyes opened, focusing on his face with difficulty. She was a beautiful woman, he realized, even with her face smudged with soot and her hair tangled and singed. She had strong features, a determined chin, and those remarkable amber eyes that seemed to look right through him. "Do what you must," she said, her voice stronger now. "I trust you." Those 3 words hit Vincent harder than he expected. She did not know him, had no reason to trust him except that he had pulled her from the flames. But she had given him that trust anyway, and he vowed silently that he would be worthy of it. He worked carefully, cleaning the burns with cool water and applying a salve he made from herbs and animal fat. It was not much, but it would help prevent infection and ease some of the pain. Sophia bit her lip but did not cry out, though he could see tears sliding down her cheeks. When he finished bandaging her hands and wrists, he sat back on his heels and looked at her seriously. "Your dress is ruined," he said. "I can see burns through the fabric on your legs. I have clothes that belonged to my mother. She passed 8 years ago, but I kept her things. You need to change into something clean so I can treat any other burns." Sophia's cheeks flushed, but she nodded. "I understand. I would not risk infection for the sake of modesty." Vincent helped her stand and guided her to his bedroom, the only private space in the house. He brought his mother's trunk and opened it, pulling out a simple cotton nightgown and a warm robe. "I will be outside," he said. "Call for me when you are ready, or if you need help." He closed the door and returned to the main room, adding more wood to the fire and setting coffee on to boil. His hands were shaking now that the immediate crisis had passed, and he gripped the edge of the stove to steady himself. He kept seeing her in that wagon, flames consuming everything around her, kept feeling the heat of the fire as he pulled her free. A few minutes later and she would have been dead. The thought made him feel sick. "Vincent," her voice came from the bedroom, weak but clear. He hurried to the door. "Yes, I cannot manage the buttons, my hands." He understood immediately. The bandages made it impossible for her to work the small buttons on the dress. "May I help, please?" He opened the door and found her standing by the bed, her face turned away from him. The back of her dress was charred and torn, revealing patches of reddened skin beneath. Vincent swallowed hard and approached her carefully, keeping his movements professional and efficient as he worked the buttons free. He could feel her trembling, though whether from cold, pain, or the awkwardness of the situation he could not tell. When the dress was open, he stepped back. "Can you manage from here?" "I think so," she said softly. "Thank you." He left the room again and paced by the fire, drinking coffee he did not taste. When she called for him again, he found her seated on the edge of the bed in his mother's nightgown, the robe wrapped tightly around her. Her legs were visible below the hem of the nightgown, and he could see burns on her shins and one ankle. "I am sorry," she said, and he heard the embarrassment in her voice. "This is terribly improper." "You nearly died tonight," Vincent said firmly. "There is nothing improper about saving your life. Now let me see those burns so I can treat them." He knelt in front of her and carefully examined the injuries. They were not as severe as the ones on her hands, but they still needed attention. He worked in silence, applying salve and bandages, acutely aware of her presence, of the trust she continued to place in him. When he finished, he looked up at her. "You should rest now. Take the bed, I will sleep by the fire." "I cannot take your bed," she protested. "You have already done so much." "You are injured and in shock," Vincent said. "You need proper rest, I insist." She looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion won out. "Very well. But tomorrow I will not be such a burden." "You are no burden," he said, and was surprised to realize he meant it completely. He helped her lie down and covered her with several quilts his mother had made years ago. Sophia's eyes were already closing as her head touched the pillow. Vincent stood there for a moment, watching her, feeling something shift in his chest that he could not quite name. Then he quietly left the room and closed the door. The storm raged outside for 3 more days. Vincent tended to his animals in the barn, fighting his way through snow that came up to his thighs, then returned to the house to care for Sophia. He changed her bandages twice a day, made her soup and strong coffee, and slowly she began to heal. The shock wore off and she started to talk, telling him about her life in bits and pieces. She had been a schoolteacher in Portland, Oregon, she said. Her parents had died of influenza the previous winter, leaving her alone and struggling to make ends meet. She had heard about teaching positions in the mining camps of Idaho, where men with children and money were desperate for someone to educate their sons and daughters. She had sold everything she owned, bought a wagon and supplies, and set out to make a new life for herself. "I thought I was being brave," she said on the 3rd day, sitting by the fire with a quilt wrapped around her shoulders. Her hands were healing well, the bandages now smaller, and she could hold a cup of coffee without too much difficulty. "Instead, I was just foolish. I should have waited for spring, should have joined a group of travelers instead of going alone." "You were brave," Vincent said, seated across from her in his father's old chair. "Foolish sometimes, maybe, but brave nonetheless." Not many women would set out alone across the territories to start a new life. "Not many women are as desperate as I was," Sophia said with a rueful smile. "I had no prospects in Portland, no family, no future. At least in the mining camps I could use my education to earn a living." "What will you do now?" Vincent asked. "All your supplies are gone. Your wagon is destroyed." Sophia stared into the fire for a long moment. "I do not know," she admitted. "I spent every cent I had on that wagon and those supplies. I have nothing left except the clothes on my back, and those belong to your mother." "You are welcome to them," Vincent said. "And you are welcome to stay here until the pass clears and you can get to Boise safely. Once there, perhaps you can find work until you can save enough to continue your journey." "You are very kind," Sophia said, looking at him with those amber eyes that seemed to see right into his soul. "Why are you helping me like this? You do not know me." Vincent considered the question. Why was he helping her? It would have been enough to bring her to safety, to tend her wounds, and then send her on her way. But the thought of her leaving made him feel hollow inside, and he had only known her 3 days. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said finally. "And because I would not feel right turning you out into the world with nothing after you have suffered so much." It was not the complete truth, but it was all he was ready to admit, even to himself. On the 4th day, the storm finally broke. The sun came out, blindingly bright on the fresh snow, and the world seemed reborn in white and blue and gold. Sophia stood at the window, looking out at the mountains that surrounded the valley, her expression wistful. "It is beautiful here," she said. "So different from Portland. There everything is green and wet and close together. Here you can see for miles." Vincent came to stand beside her. "I have always loved this land," he said. "My father used to say that a man could be free here in a way he could never be in the old country. He was right." "Where in Italy was your father from?" Sophia asked. "Tuscany. A little village in the hills. He came to America when he was 18, worked on the railroads for years, and saved every penny until he could claim his own land. He met my mother in Sacramento. She was Irish, working as a seamstress. They came here together and built this ranch from nothing. You must miss them very much." "Every day," Vincent said quietly, "but I try to live in a way that would make them proud. That is all any of us can do, I think." They stood in companionable silence, watching the sunlight sparkle on the snow. Vincent was acutely aware of Sophia beside him, of the faint scent of the lavender soap she had used that morning, of the way her hair caught the light like dark honey. He found himself wanting to know everything about her, every thought and dream and fear. "Tell me about teaching," he said impulsively. "What is it like?" Sophia smiled, and it transformed her face, making her look younger and more carefree. "It is wonderful and frustrating and exhausting all at once," she said. "Children can be cruel and kind in the same breath. They test you constantly, but when you see understanding dawn in their eyes, when they learn something new and you know you helped them reach that moment, it is the most satisfying feeling in the world." "You love it," Vincent said. It was not a question. "I do," Sophia admitted. "I always wanted to teach, even when I was a child myself. My own teacher, Mrs. Harrison, was the one who encouraged me to pursue it. She said I had a gift for making complicated things simple, for helping people see things in new ways." "I can believe that," Vincent said. "You have a way of talking that makes a person want to listen." Sophia blushed, a pretty pink staining her cheeks. "That is kind of you to say." Over the following days, as Sophia's burns continued to heal, they fell into an easy routine. Vincent would rise early and tend to the animals, then return to find Sophia preparing breakfast. She insisted on helping despite his protests, saying that she would go mad if she had to sit still any longer. They ate together, talking about everything and nothing. She told him stories about her students in Portland, about the troublemakers and the shy ones and the brilliant children who absorbed knowledge like sponges. He told her about ranching, about the hard work and the satisfaction of building something with your own hands, about the horses he bred and the cattle he raised. In the afternoons, when her hands grew tired, she would sit by the fire and read from his small collection of books while he worked on repairing tack or carving new fence posts. Sometimes she would read aloud, her voice filling the cabin with stories of adventure and romance. Vincent found himself watching her more than he should, noticing the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the way her nose crinkled when she found something amusing. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after the fire, Sophia set down the book she had been reading and looked at him seriously. "Vincent, I need to talk to you about my situation." He set aside the piece of leather he had been working on. "All right. I cannot continue to impose on your hospitality indefinitely," she said. "My hands are nearly healed. The past should be clear within the week. I need to make plans." "What kind of plans?" Vincent asked, though he knew what she was going to say and dreaded hearing it. "I thought perhaps I could find work in Boys," Sophia said. "Maybe as a seamstress or a cook while I save money. Eventually I could still head to the mining camps or perhaps find a teaching position in town." "That is a sound plan," Vincent said, though the words felt like ash in his mouth. "You do not sound enthusiastic," Sophia observed. Vincent stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. "I will miss you when you go," he said honestly. "These past 2 weeks have been the happiest I have been since my parents died. It is nice to have someone to talk to, someone to share meals with. The cabin feels less empty with you here." He heard her rise and come to stand beside him. "I will miss you too," she said softly. "You saved my life, Vincent. I will never forget that, and you have been so kind, so generous. I wish I had some way to repay you." Vincent turned to look at her. In the fading light, her face was soft and beautiful, her eyes luminous. "You have already repaid me," he said. "Just by being here, by trusting me, by sharing yourself with me, that is more than enough." They stood close together, so close he could feel the warmth of her body. Vincent wanted to reach for her, to pull her into his arms and tell her that he did not want her to go, that the thought of this cabin without her in it was unbearable. But he held back. She was vulnerable, dependent on him, and it would be wrong to take advantage of that. If she stayed, it had to be her choice freely made. "Sophia," he began, then stopped, not sure what he wanted to say. She looked up at him, waiting. Her hand lifted, almost unconsciously, and touched his arm. "Yes. I just want you to know that you are welcome here for as long as you want to stay," he said. "There is no rush. Take all the time you need to decide what you want to do." "Thank you," she said, and her hand squeezed his arm gently before falling away. "That means more to me than you know." That night, Vincent lay by the fire and stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. He could hear Sophia moving around in the bedroom, could imagine her sitting on the bed in his mother's nightgown, brushing her hair before she slept. He wondered what she was thinking, whether she felt any of the connection that he felt, whether the thought of leaving made her as sad as it made him. He must have eventually slept, because he woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. Sophia was in the kitchen, humming softly as she cooked. She was wearing one of his mother's day dresses, a simple blue calico that fit her remarkably well. Her hair was pinned up, and she looked domestic and comfortable in his space. "Good morning," she said cheerfully when she saw him stirring. "I hope you do not mind that I started breakfast." "Not at all," Vincent said, getting up and splashing water on his face from the basin. "It smells wonderful." They ate together, and Sophia seemed in particularly good spirits. She chatted about the book she had been reading, about her plans to bake bread that afternoon if he had enough flour. Vincent watched her and felt his heart expanding in his chest, felt all the lonely places inside him filling up with light. After breakfast, he went out to check on the horses. The pass was clearing, just as Sophia had said. In a few days, a rider could make it to Boys easily. The thought filled him with dread. He stood in the barn, breathing in the familiar smells of hay and horses, trying to figure out what to do. He could tell her how he felt, but what if she did not feel the same way? What if she thought he was taking advantage of her gratitude? She was educated, refined, a teacher. He was a rancher, a man who worked with his hands and smelled of horses and leather. What could he offer her besides this isolated ranch in the mountains? But then he thought about the way she looked at him sometimes, The way her face lit up when he came in from the barn, the way she had touched his arm last night. Maybe, just maybe, she felt something too. Vincent made his decision. He would tell her. If she rejected him, at least he would know he had tried. If she felt even a fraction of what he felt, then maybe they could build something together, something real and lasting. He returned to the cabin to find Sophia kneading bread dough, her sleeves rolled up and flour dusting her nose. She looked up and smiled at him, and his heart stuttered in his chest. "The pass is clearing," he said without preamble. "You could make it to Boys in a few days if the weather holds." Her smile faded slightly. "I see. That is good news." "Is it?" Vincent asked, moving closer. "Sophia, I need to say something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. Can you do that?" She set down the dough and wiped her hands on a cloth, her expression suddenly serious. "Of course." Vincent took a deep breath. "These past 2 weeks have meant more to me than I can properly express. Having you here, talking to you, getting to know you, it has made me realize how lonely I have been. I thought I was content with my life, with my ranch and my animals and my solitude. But you showed me that I was just existing, not living. When I think about you leaving, about this cabin being empty again, it feels like something is being torn out of me. I know I have no right to ask this. I know you barely know me, but I cannot let you go without telling you the truth. Sophia, I am falling in love with you. Maybe I have been since the moment I pulled you from that burning wagon. I do not expect you to feel the same way. I know you have plans, a life you want to build, but I had to tell you. I had to let you know that if you wanted to stay, if you wanted to build that life here with me, I would do everything in my power to make you happy. I would help you start a school if that is what you want. We could bring education to the children in this valley and the neighboring ranches. Or if you want to continue to the mining camps, I will take you there myself and make sure you arrive safely. Whatever you want, whatever you need, I will do it. I just need you to know that you have choices, and one of those choices is staying here with me." He stopped, his heart pounding so hard he thought she must be able to hear it. Sophia stood very still, her eyes wide, her lips slightly parted. For a long moment she said nothing, and Vincent felt his hope beginning to crumble. Then she spoke, her voice shaking slightly. "You are falling in love with me." "Yes," Vincent said simply. "I know it is too soon, I know it is probably foolish, but it is the truth." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, and Vincent felt his stomach drop. He had made a terrible mistake. He had pushed too hard, revealed too much. "I am sorry," he began, but she cut him off. "No," she said, and her voice was fierce. "Do not apologize. Vincent, I thought I was the only one feeling this way. I thought I was being foolish, letting myself develop feelings for you when you had just been kind, when you were just helping someone in need. I kept telling myself that I was confusing gratitude with something more, that once I left here, I would forget about you and move on with my life. But I do not want to forget about you. I do not want to move on. When I think about leaving this cabin, leaving you, it breaks my heart. I have been here 2 weeks, and I feel more at home than I ever felt in Portland. I feel more myself when I am with you than I have felt in years. So yes, Vincent Moretti, I will stay. I will stay and help you build a school, and I will stay because I am falling in love with you too, and I want to see where this could go." Vincent felt like all the air had been knocked out of his lungs. Then he was moving, crossing the space between them in 2 strides and pulling her into his arms. She came willingly, her hands clutching at his shirt, and when he lowered his mouth to hers, she met him halfway. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. Then it deepened, and Vincent felt something settle into place inside him, like a piece of himself that had been missing finally finding its home. Sophia tasted like flower and coffee and possibility, and he never wanted to stop kissing her. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Sophia laughed, the sound bright and joyful. "Well," she said, her cheeks flushed and her eyes sparkling, "I suppose that settles it then." "I suppose it does," Vincent agreed, unable to stop smiling. They spent the rest of the day in a happy daze, talking about the future, about the school Sophia would start, about the life they would build together. Vincent rode into the foothills to check on his cattle, and Sophia finished her bread, and when he returned they sat by the fire and made plans far into the night. "We should get married," Vincent said at one point, the words tumbling out before he could think better of them. "I mean, if you want to. I know we have not known each other long, but I do not want there to be any question about your reputation, and I do not want to wait. I want to spend every day of the rest of my life with you, starting now." Sophia looked at him with eyes full of love and laughter. "Are you proposing to me, Vincent Moretti?" "I suppose I am," Vincent said, suddenly nervous. "Though I am making a hash of it. I should get down on one knee, I should have a ring, I should do this properly." Sophia stopped his babbling by the simple expedient of kissing him. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "I do not need a fancy proposal," she said. "And we can get a ring in boys when we go for supplies. All I need is you asking me if I will be your wife. That is all I need, Vincent." Vincent took her hands in his, careful of her healing burns. "Sophia Mallory, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They made the trip to Boise the following week. The pass was clear, the weather had turned mild, and Vincent's wagon rattled along the frozen road with ease. Sophia sat beside him on the bench, wrapped in blankets and one of his mother's coats, pointing out landmarks and exclaiming over the scenery. Everything seemed new and bright through her eyes, and Vincent found himself seeing the land he loved with fresh appreciation. In Boise, they visited the general store for supplies, and Vincent bought Sophia a simple gold band that fit her finger perfectly. They stopped at the land office so Vincent could file papers establishing Sophia's school on a corner of his property, making it official. Then they went to the small church at the edge of town and spoke to the minister. Reverend Thomas was an older man with kind eyes and a booming voice. He listened to their story, nodding thoughtfully, then smiled broadly. "I will be happy to marry you," he said. "Though I should tell you, young lady, that this man is known in these parts as one of the most honest, hard-working ranchers in the territory. You are getting a good man." "I know," Sophia said, squeezing Vincent's hand. "I am very lucky." "You are both lucky," the Reverend said. "Now, when would you like the ceremony?" They were married 3 days later in that same small church, with the Reverend's wife and the owner of the general store standing as witnesses. Sophia wore a simple dress she had bought with money Vincent insisted she take, a soft gray wool with white lace at the collar. Vincent wore his best suit, the one he had not worn since his father's funeral, and felt both nervous and elated. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Vincent kissed Sophia with all the love and promise he felt, and the witnesses applauded. They signed the register, Sophia's new signature reading Sophia Moretti in careful script, and then they were walking out into the winter sunshine, married. They stayed in Boise one night, at the only hotel in town, and that night Vincent made Sophia his wife in truth. He was gentle and patient, mindful of her innocence and her lingering healing burns, and when she cried out his name in pleasure and wonder, he felt like the luckiest man alive. The next morning, they loaded the wagon with more supplies than Vincent had originally planned to buy, including primers and slates and chalk for the school Sophia would start. They also bought fabric for curtains and a new quilt, nails and lumber for the additions Vincent wanted to make to the cabin now that he had a wife. The trip back to the ranch felt shorter somehow, filled with laughter and stolen kisses and plans for the future. When they arrived, Vincent carried Sophia over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition, and set her down gently in the main room. "Welcome home, Mrs. Moretti," he said, and the words felt right and true. "Thank you, Mr. Moretti," Sophia replied, reaching up to kiss him. "I cannot wait to start our life together." Spring came early that year, the snow melting rapidly and revealing the greening grass beneath. Sophia began work on her school, spreading word to the neighboring ranches and the few families scattered throughout the valley that she would be offering lessons to any children who wanted to learn. Vincent built her a small schoolhouse next to the cabin, a single room with windows on 3 sides to let in the light, and a stove for heat. The first day of school, 7 children showed up, ranging in age from 6 to 14. Sophia greeted each one with genuine warmth, learning their names and their interests, and by the end of the day, she was glowing with happiness. "It was perfect," she told Vincent that evening as they sat on the porch and watched the sunset. "The children are eager to learn and their parents are so grateful. This is exactly what I wanted to do, Vincent. Thank you for making it possible." "You made it possible," Vincent said, pulling her close. "I just gave you the space to do it." As spring turned to summer, their life together found a rhythm. Sophia taught her students in the mornings and afternoons, and Vincent worked the ranch, expanding his herd and breaking new horses. In the evenings, they came together, sharing meals and conversation and the physical joy of being married. They were happy in a way that felt both simple and profound, building something real and lasting. In late summer, Sophia began to feel ill in the mornings. At first, she thought it was something she had eaten, but when the illness persisted and her monthly courses stopped, she realized what it meant. She told Vincent one evening after supper, her voice soft with wonder. "I think I am with child," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat belly. "I think we are going to have a baby." Vincent's face went through a series of expressions: shock, joy, fear, and then a love so profound it brought tears to his eyes. "A baby," he repeated. "Sophia, are you sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor," she said. "But all the signs are there. Vincent, we are going to be parents." He pulled her into his arms and held her tight, his face buried in her hair. "I love you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you so much, Sophia. You have given me everything I never knew I needed." "You have given me the same," she whispered back. "You saved my life, and then you gave me a reason to live it fully. I could not be happier." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Sophia continued to teach through the fall, only stopping when she grew too large and uncomfortable to stand for long periods. Vincent was attentive and protective, almost comically so, hovering over her and insisting she rest at every opportunity. Sophia tolerated his fussing with good humor, knowing it came from a place of deep love. In February, a year and a month after Vincent had pulled her from the burning wagon, Sophia went into labor. Vincent rode through a light snowfall to fetch Mrs. Henderson, a neighboring rancher's wife who had birthed 6 children of her own and helped deliver dozens more. Mrs. Henderson arrived, took one look at Sophia, and shooed Vincent out of the bedroom. The labor was long and difficult, and Vincent paced the main room like a caged animal, jumping at every sound from behind the closed door. When he finally heard the thin, angry wail of a newborn baby, he sank to his knees in relief. Mrs. Henderson emerged a few minutes later, smiling broadly. "You have a son, Mr. Moretti, a big, healthy boy with a good set of lungs on him, and your wife did beautifully. She is tired but well. You can go in now." Vincent stood on shaking legs and entered the bedroom. Sophia was propped up against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket, and when she looked up at Vincent, her smile was like the sun coming out. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Vincent approached the bed and looked down at the baby. His son had a shock of dark hair and a red, angry little face. As Vincent watched, the baby's eyes opened, revealing dark blue irises that would probably turn brown like his own. The baby's tiny hand emerged from the blanket and waved aimlessly. "He is perfect," Vincent said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are perfect. I do not have words for what I am feeling right now, Sophia." "I know," she said, reaching for his hand. "I feel it too. Sit with us, Vincent. Hold your son." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, and Sophia transferred the baby into his arms. Vincent had held babies before, the children of his ranch hands and neighbors, but this was different. This was his son, his and Sophia's, a new life they had created together. The baby was warm and solid in his arms, and Vincent felt a fierce protectiveness surge through him. "What should we name him?" Sophia asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never settled on one. Now, looking at his son, Vincent knew exactly what he wanted to call him. "Thomas," he said, "after my father. Thomas Marco Morty, what do you think?" Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "I think it is perfect. Welcome to the world, Thomas Marco Morty. We have been waiting for you." The years that followed were full and rich. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's dark eyes and his mother's quick mind. Sophia returned to teaching when Thomas was 6 months old, bringing him to the schoolhouse and letting the older children take turns watching him while she taught. The school continued to grow, with more families settling in the valley and sending their children to learn from the kind, patient teacher who had married the Italian rancher. When Thomas was 3, Sophia gave birth to a daughter they named Elena, after Vincent's mother. Elena was quieter than her brother, with serious amber eyes like her mother and a thoughtful disposition. She loved books from the moment she could hold one, and Sophia would often find her sitting in the schoolhouse, just looking at the pictures in the primers. 2 years after Elena came another son, Marcus, who was loud and boisterous and kept them all on their toes. Then, when Sophia was 32 and Vincent was 35, they had one more child, a daughter they named Isabella, who completed their family. The ranch prospered under Vincent's careful management. He expanded the house, adding more bedrooms for the children and a proper parlor for Sophia to entertain the neighbors who came to visit. The school became a central part of the valley community, with Sophia teaching not just children, but sometimes hosting evening classes for adults who wanted to improve their reading and writing. On their 10th anniversary, Vincent surprised Sophia with a trip to Boise, leaving the children in the care of Mrs. Henderson and her daughters. They stayed at the same hotel where they had spent their wedding night, and Vincent took Sophia to dinner at the finest restaurant in town. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked her over dessert. "Staying here instead of going to the mining camps. You could have had a different life, maybe an easier one." Sophia reached across the table and took his hand. "I have never regretted it, not for a single moment," she said firmly. "This is the life I was meant to have, Vincent. You are the man I was meant to love. Everything that happened, the fire, the snowstorm, you pulling me from those flames, it all led me here. How could I regret any of it?" "I feel the same way," Vincent said. "Sometimes I think about that night, about how close I came to not riding that trail, to not being there when you needed me. It terrifies me to think about a world where we never met." "But we did meet," Sophia said, "and we built something beautiful together. We have a family, a school, a community. We have each other. That is more than most people ever get, Vincent. We are blessed." They made love that night with the passion and tenderness of a couple who had grown together, who knew each other's bodies and hearts as well as their own. In the morning, they returned to the ranch and their children, and life continued in its familiar, comfortable patterns. The children grew. Thomas became a skilled horseman and helped his father on the ranch. Alina developed a love for teaching and began helping her mother in the school. Marcus was a natural athlete, always running and climbing and wrestling with the neighbor boys. And Isabella, the baby, charmed everyone with her sweet nature and infectious laugh. Vincent and Sophia grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They had weathered storms, both literal and figurative. They had struggled through harsh winters and dry summers, through illnesses and injuries, through the normal challenges of raising a family and running a ranch and a school. But through it all, they had each other, and that made everything bearable. When Vincent was 50 and Sophia was 47, they finally sold the ranch to Thomas, who had married a girl from one of the neighboring ranches and was ready to start his own family. Vincent and Sophia moved into a smaller house in Boise, close to the church where they had been married. Sophia took a position teaching at the newly established public school in town, and Vincent volunteered his time helping new immigrants learn the skills they would need to succeed in the American West. They were happy in retirement, enjoying the slower pace and the freedom to travel occasionally. They visited Portland, where Sophia showed Vincent the places where she had grown up and taught. They traveled to San Francisco and saw the ocean together, marveling at its vastness. They even made a trip back to the valley to visit their children and grandchildren, Thomas and his wife now having 3 children of their own. One evening, sitting on the porch of their boys' home and watching the sun set over the mountains, Vincent took Sophia's hand and squeezed it gently. "Do you remember the first sunset we watched together?" he asked. "It was the day I asked you to marry me." Sophia smiled, the lines around her eyes crinkling in the way he loved. "Of course I remember. I remember everything about those days, Vincent. They were some of the happiest of my life, even though I had just lost everything I owned and nearly died in a fire." "You gained something too," Vincent pointed out. "You gained me." "The best trade I ever made," Sophia said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I would do it all again in a heartbeat, the fire and the fear and the pain, just to end up here with you." "I love you, Sophia Mallory," Vincent said, kissing the top of her head. "I have loved you since the moment I pulled you from those flames, and I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "I love you too," Sophia said. "Always and forever." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the mountains and the stars began to appear, 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built a life that was rich and full and meaningful. They had started with fire and snow and terror, and they had created warmth and safety and love. As the years continued to pass, Vincent and Sophia remained active in the boys' community. They became fixtures at the church, where Vincent served on the council and Sophia organized charitable efforts for families in need. Their home became a gathering place for their children and grandchildren, who visited often and filled the house with laughter and life. Alina followed in her mother's footsteps and became a teacher, taking a position at a school in Silver City. Marcus joined the Territorial Rangers, keeping the peace in the wild Idaho Territory and occasionally stopping by to regale his parents with stories of his adventures. Isabella married a banker and settled in Boise itself, just 3 streets away from her parents, and made them grandparents again with 2 daughters of her own. Vincent's health began to decline when he was 62. The years of hard physical labor on the ranch had taken their toll, and his joints ached in the cold weather. But he never complained, accepting his limitations with the same grace he had shown throughout his life. Sophia nursed him tenderly, just as he had nursed her all those years ago after pulling her from the burning wagon. "We have come full circle," she told him one morning as she helped him dress. "You took care of me when I needed it most, and now I get to do the same for you." "I do not deserve you," Vincent said, cupping her face with his gnarled hand. "I never have." "Nonsense," Sophia said firmly. "We deserve each other, Vincent. We have earned this life together through years of love and commitment and partnership. Do not discount that." On their 30th wedding anniversary, all 4 of their children and their families descended on the boys' house for a celebration. The small home was bursting with people, and Sophia spent the day cooking and laughing and holding grandchildren on her lap. Vincent sat in his favorite chair and watched the chaos with a contented smile, occasionally catching Sophia's eye across the room and winking at her. That evening, after everyone had left and they were alone again, Vincent pulled Sophia into his arms and danced with her in the parlor, just the 2 of them swaying to music only they could hear. 30 years, he murmured against her hair. 30 years since I made you my wife. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once." "I know what you mean," Sophia said, her arms tight around him. "Sometimes I can still see the young man who pulled me from those flames, so strong and brave. Other times I look at you and see every year we have shared written in your face, and I love both versions of you equally." "You are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen," Vincent said. "Time has only made you more lovely to me." They continued to dance until Vincent's strength gave out and they had to sit down. But they sat close together on the sofa, Sophia's head on Vincent's shoulder, and talked about their life, about the choices they had made and the blessings they had received. "If you could go back," Vincent asked, "would you change anything?" Sophia thought about it seriously. "I would have been more patient with Marcus when he was going through his rebellious phase," she said. "And I would have visited my parents' graves in Portland more often before we moved to Boise. But the big things, no, I would not change any of the big things. I would have told you I loved you sooner," Vincent said. "I wasted nearly 2 weeks being afraid to speak up, but otherwise, no, I would not change a thing." They stayed up late into the night, remembering and laughing and occasionally crying as they talked about the life they had built together. When they finally went to bed, they fell asleep holding hands, just as they had done for 30 years. Vincent lived to the age of 67, passing peacefully in his sleep one spring morning with Sophia beside him. The funeral was large, attended by people from all over the territory who had known and respected the kind Italian rancher who had built a good life through honest work and love. Sophia stood at the graveside with her children around her and said goodbye to the man who had saved her life and then given her a reason to live it. She lived another 15 years after that, continuing to teach until she was 70, and then finally retiring to spend her days with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She never remarried, telling anyone who asked that she had already had the great love of her life and did not need another. She kept Vincent's wedding ring on a chain around her neck, close to her heart. On quiet evenings, she would sit on her porch and look toward the mountains where the ranch had been, where she and Vincent had built their life together, and she would remember. She remembered the fire and the fear, the sensation of being pulled from the flames by strong arms, the feeling of Vincent's coat wrapped around her, and his voice telling her she was safe. She remembered the slow dawning of love as they talked by the fire, the joy of their wedding day, the pain and wonder of bringing their children into the world. She remembered every sunrise and sunset they had watched together, every kiss and touch and word of love. When Sophia died at the age of 82, she was surrounded by 3 of her 4 children, Marcus having passed away 5 years earlier in the line of duty, and a dozen grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Her last words were, "I am coming, Vincent," and she died with a smile on her face. They buried her next to Vincent in the boys' cemetery, and the entire town turned out for the funeral of the beloved teacher who had educated 2 generations of children. Thomas gave the eulogy, speaking about his mother's courage and kindness, about the love she and his father had shared, about the legacy they had left behind. "My parents started with nothing," he said, his voice carrying across the gathered mourners. "My mother lost everything she owned in a fire, nearly died in a snowstorm, and was saved by a stranger who became the love of her life. Together, they built a family, a school, a community. They showed us all what true love looks like, what commitment and partnership and devotion mean. They left us with the greatest gift parents can give their children, the example of a life well lived, and a love that lasted through every trial and triumph. We will miss them every day, but we will honor them by trying to live as they did, with kindness and courage and open hearts." The years passed, and the story of Vincent and Sophia Mallory became a local legend, the tale of the cowboy who pulled the schoolteacher from the burning wagon in the snowstorm and ended up marrying her. Their great-grandchildren would tell the story to their children, keeping the memory alive. The little schoolhouse Vincent had built still stood on the land where the ranch had been, now a historical marker commemorating the first school in that part of Idaho Territory. Inside, a plaque read, "Built 1883 by Vincent Moretti for his wife, Sophia Mallory Moretti, teacher. May all who enter here seek knowledge and find love." The legacy they left was not just in the schools and the children they had taught, or even in the large family they had created. It was in the example they set, showing that love could be found in the most unexpected places, that courage could come in quiet moments as well as dramatic ones, and that a life built on partnership and devotion would stand the test of time. They had started in fire and snow, a man and a woman thrown together by circumstance, and they had created something that would last for generations. Their story reminded people that sometimes the worst moments of our lives, the times when we are most afraid and most vulnerable, can become the doorway to our greatest blessings. That a tragedy can transform into a beginning, that loss can lead to gain, and that love can be found even in the midst of flames and storms. Vincent and Sophia had lived fully and loved deeply, and in doing so, they had left an imprint on the world that would never be erased. Long after the last person who knew them personally had passed away, the story remained, a testament to the power of love and the beauty of 2 lives joined together by fate and choice, and an unbreakable bond that not even death could sever. In the end, that was their true legacy, not the buildings or the family tree or the historical markers, but the simple, profound truth that love, real love, the kind that saves and transforms and endures, is the most powerful force in the world. Vincent had pulled Sophia from the flames, but she had saved him too, from loneliness and emptiness and a life half-lived. Together, they had been complete, and together they had created something beautiful that would echo through time. The story of the burning wagon in the snowstorm, of the cowboy who became a hero and then a husband, of the teacher who lost everything and gained the world, lived on. It was told around campfires and dinner tables, in classrooms and churches, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, even when all seems lost, hope and love can emerge from the ashes, stronger and brighter than the flames that threaten to consume them. And somewhere, in whatever place souls go after death, Vincent and Sophia were together still, watching over the family they had created and the love they had built, satisfied that their time on earth had meant something, that they had made a difference, and that their love story, which had begun so dramatically in fire and snow, had ended exactly as it should, with two hearts forever intertwined, eternal and unbreakable.